Hello again, friends. Today I have a request for one small part of a very large story. In fact, it's actually a story that is 2 books long. This will be The Walrus and The Carpenter by Lewis Carroll. I have no actual notes on the wonderful and yet very tragic poem, so instead I will start out with some notes about the author. Lewis Carroll was the pen name of Charles Lutwig Dodgson. The Reverend Dodgson, he was actually ordained, was a close friend of the Dean of Oxford University and his family, one of whom was a young girl named Alice. The Reverend was particularly fond of Alice. He wrote the Wonderland Tales for her. The Reverend was also a photographer, and Alice was one of his favorite subjects. I will show you one of his photos. That is Alice. He also took a lot of very nice portraits of families as well as self-portraits. He even owned his own photography studio for a time. As you can see from the photos, the real Alice had short, dark hair, and the Reverend was very upset that the artist hired by his publishers, John Tenniel, made her a blonde with long, wavy hair. However, the publishers went ahead and used the art, making the character in the book the kind little blonde in puff sleeves and an apron that we all recognize today. In a way, I'm glad of it. I would be very sad if this had been another situation like the one Christopher Robin had. Still, one of the unique things about these books is the surreal, dreamlike quality that he was able to write. The way things seamlessly change and morph around the little dreamer. How she takes nonsensical things completely in stride and without questions. No movie has really done justice to these sweet stories, and only Walt Disney ever came close. Everyone tries to make sense of the stories, but the point is that none of it makes sense. It's a dream. Now, I acknowledge that there is some controversy about these stories and their author. The wonderful song White Rabbit by Jefferson Airplane is not without foundation, and there is a great deal of speculation about how close the Reverend was to Alice. But a deep dive into the Reverend will be for someone else. Here we read stories. So join me as we read The Walrus and the Carpenter by Lewis Carroll. The sun was shining on the sea, shining with all its might. He did his very best to make the billows smooth and bright. And this was odd because it was the middle of the night. The moon was shining sulkily because she thought the sun had got no business to be there after the day was done. It's very rude of him, she said, to come and spoil the fun. The sea was wet as wet could be. The sands were dry as dry. You could not see a cloud because no cloud was in the sky. No birds were flying overhead. There were no birds to fly. The Walrus and the Carpenter were walking close at hand. They wept like anything to see such quantities of sand. If this were only cleared away, they said, it would be grand.
I don't like sand.
If 7 maids with 7 mops swept it for half a year, do you suppose, the Walrus said, that they could get it clear? I doubt it, said the Carpenter, and shed a bitter tear. Oh, oysters, come and walk with us, the Walrus did beseech. A pleasant walk, a pleasant talk along the briny beach. We cannot do with more than 4, to give a hand to each. The eldest oyster looked at him, but never a word he said. The eldest oyster winked his eye and shook his heavy head, meaning to say he did not choose to leave the oyster bed. But 4 young oysters hurried up, all eager for the treat. Their coats were brushed, their faces washed, their shoes were clean and neat. And this was odd because, they hadn't any feet. 4 other oysters followed them, and yet another 4, and thick and fast they came at last, and more and more and more, all hopping through the frothy waves and scrambling to the shore. The Walrus and the Carpenter walked on a mile or so, and then they rested on a rock, conveniently low. and all little oysters stood and waited in a row. "The time has come," the walrus said, "to talk of many things, of shoes and ships and sealing wax, of cabbages and kings, and why the sea is boiling hot, and whether pigs have wings." "But wait a bit," the oysters cried, "before we have our chat, for some of us are out of breath, and all of us are fat." "No hurry," said the carpenter. They thanked him much for that. "A loaf of bread," the walrus said, "is what we chiefly need. Pepper and vinegar, besides, are very good indeed. Now, if you're ready, oysters dear, we can begin to feed." "But not on us," the oysters cried, turning a little blue. "After such kindness, that would be a dismal thing to do." "The night is fine," the walrus said. "Do you admire the view? It was so kind of you to come, and you were very nice." The carpenter said nothing but, "Cut us another slice. I wish you were not quite so deaf. I've had to ask you twice." "It seems a shame," the walrus said, "to play them such a trick, after we've brought them out so far and made them trot so quick." The carpenter said nothing but, "The butter's spread too thick." "I weep for you," the walrus said. "I deeply sympathize." With sobs and tears he sorted out those of the largest size, holding his pocket handkerchief before his streaming eyes. "Oh, oysters," said the carpenter, "you've had a pleasant run. Shall we be trotting home again?" But answer came there none. And this was scarcely odd, because they'd eaten every one. Oh, I love that poem, as sad and nonsensical as it is. I had the poem memorized back when I was little more than a dropper. I've read these stories so many times, the book fell apart, and I kept it together with masking tape. There was a time when I could have recited to you huge portions of the tale, but over the years it has leaked out of my little brain. I hope I was able to bring the poem to life for you. Next week we have another request, a wonderful-looking Russian tale. I can't wait to read it to you. I'm sure it will be very exciting. I wonder if Baba Yaga will make an appearance. Now is the time I ask you to like, share, and subscribe. The song of all YouTubers, I know, but I still have dreams of growing and maybe reaching a few more people. If you would like to have an annoying little red dot on the bell at the top of the page, just click on the bell icon and change the setting to all. If you would like to support me on Patreon, Instagram, or Facebook, there are links in the description below. I would like to thank Pixabay.com, as they are a lifesaver for tiny channels like mine, and they have my undying gratitude. And I cannot forget to thank you, my friends, for taking time out of your busy lives to listen to a small blue water spirit. It means the world to me. And now, a special thank you to my Patreon friends.